Okay, so moving on to part 5 of chapter number 7, we come on to what we call impact of the internet on society. Okay, so how has society been affected by the internet? Okay, so it says the development of the internet has affected many aspects of society and people's lives. In 2016, approximately 46% of the world's population had access to the internet. We're talking about 2016. The difference between those with technology and those without is often referred to as the digital divide. Okay, so remember this word very carefully. Digital divide is basically those who have access to technology and those who do not have access to technology. Okay, so this graph shows you the red is the world population and the blue line is people who are using the internet. Okay, so this was taken in 2016. I'm sure now we are in 2020. I'm sure this graph will be very close. This line will be very close to each other. Okay, moving on to our next slide. So people's access to ICT can be affected by a number of factors. Okay, so one is economy and infrastructure. Okay, so countries with advanced economies can afford to invest in the infrastructure required to provide access to networks and the internet. In countries with emerging and developing economies, governments may prioritize other needs such as food and healthcare rather than access to digital technologies. Okay, so developed countries may have the economy and infrastructure for people to access the internet and to have good digital devices. But in developing countries, those countries might be focusing more on food and healthcare rather than on digital technologies. Okay, so one reason for this digital divide to exist is economy and infrastructure. Another problem is location. People may not be able to access online systems in remote locations. So certain locations has no the facilities in order for people to access online services. Okay, so another factor can be the location. Another factor can be politics. Certain countries, the government prevents people from accessing certain services on the internet. Okay, so that is what we call politics. Another factor can be politics. Another factor can be religion. Some religions ban access to certain technologies. Another factor that we can consider is social factor. Social factors are age, gender, education and income affect people's ability to access ICT. So certain parts of the world they may say people only above the age of 18 are able to have digital devices, or certain parts of the world, if they say, for example, males are given more preferences to digital devices than females. Okay, so these are social factors. And finally, there is something which is known as disability. If digital devices are not designed to be inclusive, people with disabilities can find accessing technology more difficult and may have to rely on adaptations to be able to use ICT. Okay, so another factor that affects people's access to digital devices are disabilities. So people who are disabled, people who do not have fingers, people who cannot see, for example, they may not be very interested in using digital devices unless digital devices are built with features that accommodate them as well. Okay, so far we have gone through a few factors. We went through economy and infrastructure, location, politics, religion, social factors and disability. So these are factors that affect people's access to ICT. Okay. Then there is also something known as information rich and information poor. Information rich and information poor is basically people who have access to the internet. They are information rich, and people who do not have access to the internet are known as information poor. Okay. So the same thing is mentioned over here. Okay, the development of the internet has widened the gap because it has increased the amount of information that is available to people online and that is unavailable to people without internet access. So they are saying because of the internet, the gap between information rich and information poor has expanded a lot. Okay, because those who have access to the internet have access to a huge amount of information, while those who do not have access to the internet have hardly any access to information. They are just limited by the television and radio. Okay, so they are saying the introduction of the internet has actually widened this gap. Okay, it's a debatable topic. And then the impact of the internet on changes in ways of socializing As people increase their use of the internet, they spend more time in the virtual world than the real world. We spoke about this earlier also. Because of the internet and because of features like social networking and all that, people are more in the virtual world than the physical world. Okay, so you'll find somebody is busy communicating with somebody who's so many miles away. Okay, but the person who is physically next to him will not be having his attention. Okay, then the internet has arguably affected the way that people think and their ability to form relationships with others. People can use the internet in order to connect with people around the world whom they have never met. Okay, so because of internet, you can actually connect with people whom you would never get a chance to physically meet. Okay, however, it can also cause people to become isolated from their own families and local communities because they spend most of their time looking at the screens of their digital devices. Okay, so like I said earlier, you might be using a digital device to talk to somebody who is miles away while you're completely forgetting about the persons or the people who are physically right next to you. Okay, so you might find this problem happening at home. You might find at home, for example, the children, for example, instead of talking to their parents and talking to their siblings, they are busy communicating with people who are miles and miles far away from them. So what happens? They automatically become isolated from their own families and local communities. Okay, so this is the end of chapter number 7. Please make sure you do answer the remaining 2 questions of this particular chapter. There are 2 more questions to go. Once you have answered this, please do save the document and upload it back into your classroom.